In the shop, I've been working on a bathroom vanity that's mostly made out of reclaimed lumber, and in this part of the series I'm going to show you how I made what I consider to be the bulletproof plywood carcass and then the reclaimed lumber face frame. I utilized different forms of joinery than you might be used to seeing on YouTube in order to make these, and I find this construction method to take a little bit longer but creates a really solid, strong piece of furniture. So like I said, the carcass is what we're going to start with, and to do that I'm making that all out of plywood. I ripped a piece of cabinet grade maple veneer plywood down to 20 3/4, which is the depth of the cabinet, and then I could go about ripping it into my side pieces. So then first up is going to be a dado for the base of the cabinet, and I'm bringing that 3/4 of an inch up so that my face frame is flush with the bottom panel of the cabinet. It won't have a lip on it. And then with the base cut, I'm now going to put a 1/2 inch rabbet for my backer on this back side. And then the way I like to join my face frames to the front of the cabinet is with a tongue on the cabinet carcass and a groove on the face frame. So even though I don't have all of my parts cut down to final size, while I have the dado stack in there, I like to cut them all so they're identical, and then I'll rip my pieces down to size. So then I could mock this up to the outside width I need, and I could measure in between my dados to get a perfect measurement for my base. I could also measure from the edge of the rabbet to the front and get my depth, because my pieces right now are oversized. And then the last dado I'm going to cut is the partition between the doors and the drawers. And that is going to be a short partition because all of the plumbing is up here as well. And then because I put that tongue on all of my scrap pieces in the beginning, I have this oversized partition with the tongue. So now I can just go cut it down and it will fit in that middle part. So one bigger thing of note is because this is a vanity, the construction of it doesn't have a lot of framing on the upper side of the cabinetry, and that is solely because this is a single sink vanity, which means the upper part of this carcass is going to have the bowl of the sink. It pretty much goes front to back, so I couldn't put a lot of supports in place. It also means that my partitions are not necessarily going to be full depth, full width, in order to avoid the P-trap and the water lines that go to the sink. But in general, you could see I construct all of my pieces with rabbets in the back. and dados for wherever I'm going to have bottoms, tops, or shelves, so you can modify this construction to meet your own needs. The carcass is usually pretty much a straightforward cutaway for how to make cabinetry. It's just going to be where your pieces are placed. Once I glue it together, I check my diagonals to make sure it's square. A little bit harder to do when you don't have any framing up top, but I'm able to get it there. So this is what this looks like all glued up. You can see how now all of my parts in the front have that tongue. And then the back, I had that 1/2-inch rabbet, but on the side that meets the wall, I actually made it 1 inch. And then that will give me a 1/2 inch to scribe. And by making it thinner, it's going to be easier to remove this material on site. So that is the basic construction of the carcass. So to start attaching my feet, I made this with the base was mounted up 3/4 of an inch because I'm going to have 1.5 inch face frame on the bottom that I wanted flush with my bottom panel. So that is why it's mounted forward, which means if I mount my feet now, a lot of the detailing is going to be covered by the side of the cabinet as well as the face frame. So I'm just going to add a spacer right here and on the other side, which will allow my feet to mount flush. Once I had my carcass done, I could start on my face frame, and for people that watch the channel every week, which is a fair amount of the views I get, you're going to notice I'm doing things a little bit differently, and I actually pulled some old footage from videos I made years ago to kind of highlight some of those changes. One of the things that has always interested me about woodworking is just that ability to grow with your skill set and modify the way you build things. So as you can see, I used to make face frames, and I will still do this, but I used to make them specifically on the carcass of the cabinet as it was built, not as a whole piece. And that was because, as you could see, bigger cabinetry didn't fit in my shop. So I not only didn't have the space to make an entire face frame as one piece and slap it on the cabinet, but also on cabinetry like this, I had to be able to take these apart and slide them back into my shop. So a whole face frame taking it on and off all the time with fitting doors and drawers would just be too much of a pain. So I designed a way to add the face frame around the whole perimeter piece by piece so that they could come apart in sections and then be transported. Now that is not the most common way to do it, and you could see originally I started with attaching the face frame with floating splines, which works really well, but I also modified that as I started to grow my skill set. When I saw how this one cabinet was made that I was cutting down for another customer, they had an integrated tongue on the front of the cabinet, and they actually use mortise and tenons for their face frame, which is a little bit time consuming for what I'm making these face frames for. They don't need to be that structural. But then I started doing an integrated tongue to remove the necessity to have a floating spline. It also saved on a lot of material. None of these methods are necessarily right or wrong, just different ways to build. And then if you watch last week's video, you'll recognize this pile of wood. This is a bunch of old 2x4s that I dimensioned and milled up in order to make the face frames in all of my doors. It's really nice, mostly reclaimed Douglas fir. Now the most common way, and I do get this comment a lot in videos where I am making face frames, is to make the face frame and then make the cabinet to fit that face frame, or make the cabinet and then put a full face frame on top of it, which is what I am doing. I decided to do that for this build because these are overlay doors, and it would just make my life easier with this process to make a standalone face frame because I don't have as many partitions as I usually do to hold up that frame. It also is a little bit more accurate way to do it, especially if you're doing inset doors, because you can square up your frame. If your carcass is a little out of square, it means attaching the face frame directly to your panels without making them stand alone means they can be off square. If you're making your face frame separately, you could square it up and plop it on that cabinet and tweak it a little bit in order to get it. So as you can see, I have that floating integrated tongue on there, and when I get to the parts where I'm going to have an intersection, you will have to remove part of that tongue, but it's really easy work with a saw and a chisel. And all I do at this point is line up where I need my parts to be. The part that you just saw me doing is going against the wall, so I allowed for scribing. And then this section on the edge, I allowed for the fact that the entire side is also going to have 3/4 dimension added to it for side panels. So I could get my 2 sides, and then my 3 horizontals are all of the same width. So that's kind of the part that changes, is I can cut the bottom and then the top, and then the top that will hold the facade panel, that's where the sink will be, all the same dimension at once. If your cabinet's a little out of square and the top is off by 1/16 of an inch, the way I used to do it was I would cut those all different dimensions. Like I said, this just will give me a more uniform look. Now, something you don't see me do a lot on the channel is use pocket hole screws to attach all this. I'm doing that not only to hold it all together, but because over time I do worry sometimes about the joint splitting. Those screws will hold everything in place. I rarely use a pocket hole screw, so you could see in the beginning of me doing this, I actually drilled it in the wrong spot. I had to plug it with a dowel, but after that I can attach those sides and my horizontals so they're all in the same plane. Once I had that done, I went and put my vertical middle in. Now this is reclaimed lumber, so it had a little bow in it, which I did notice. So you can see I'm measuring from my corners as well as my middle, and the dimension is off because that board bows in the middle. So what I did was I clamped it in order to get the same dimension across that front, and then I could cut that middle partition, put a spline, put the groove where I need it to be in that section, and on this one it's going to be flush with that middle partition on the right side, and then I can attach that one as well. So like I said, same means to an end, but with single cabinetry especially that I can transport as a single cabinet, this is a superior way to do it, and it is the more common way to do it. A lot of times people in my videos will comment and ask why I do it the way that I did, so I wanted to show videos of why exactly I came to that method. And then there's just 2 little partitions to break up the 3 drawers, little 1-inchers. I could square those up and put them on them as well. You can see with that integrated spline, this still snaps into place on the front of that cabinet just like I like, but it is built as one unit. So a little bit different construction, but like I said, same means to an end. If you're interested in the rest of this build, next week I'm going to be showing you how I made all of the doors. There's a couple false fronts, there's a couple secret doors with secret compartments to round out this vanity build.